Howzit Bru? How you guys doing? Another absolutely stunning, fantastic game of rugby. May not be so if you're an English fan or whatever, but from a neutral perspective, I'd love to find out your guys' opinion. But I thought it was an absolute fantastic game of rugby. And another sort of shocking, or not, I don't say maybe the Ireland All Blacks was a shocking result, but this game was a shocking result. So, anyway, before I jump in, my name's Kenneth. Welcome to Rugby Bru. Happy to have you here. If you enjoy this, I'd love you to subscribe. And also feel free to jump into the comments, leave your thoughts. Love to hear your input, and we have a great community here. So, welcome. So, 10 tries scored at the home of rugby at HQ. What is it? 79 points. Australia stun. And I think stun is the right word here. England by beating them 42 points to 37. What a great game of rugby. The first 20 minutes opened up, England looked very good. I think they went 15-3 ahead. And everybody, I'm sure, would have been thinking the same as me. Hey, look, Australia look decent. They look good here, but this is just going to be business as usual. Australia hasn't had a great season so far. I mean, they started off those 3 wins at home, but the Rugby Championship, the wheels came off. They lost 2 games at home to South Africa for the first time since the 70s. They beat Argentina, and Argentina thought, okay, there was something there. And then they got absolutely blitzed by 70 points in the second test match and just completely fell to pieces. And again, losing 2 games against New Zealand. And there's been a lot of talk, right, from former players, Australian players, and overseas players, coaches. I like to say, hey, this may be the end of the Wallabies being in that top tier of rugby. And you've heard me saying, hey, the top 5 teams, the Wallabies don't fit there anymore. I mean, their position in the world sort of backs it up, right? They're all the way down, been hovering around 10th, 11th place. I've been speaking in terms of Argentina is probably the 6th in the top 5, being England, Ireland, France, South Africa, New Zealand. I said, Argentina's definitely got a seat at that table. And you would have also heard me saying I feel sorry for Australia coming on this tour because they have a hard tour, Grand Slam tour, and they got the British and Irish Lions next year. And obviously, well, not obviously, but to paint the picture a little bit, is that people actually talking like Lions are going to go win 3-0 next year. What is the point? It's going to be a horror show for Australia. Even suggestions that maybe they should change the opposition and not tour Australia because it's not good for the brand from certain circles. And so, with all of that evidence that we've seen from Australia, a lot of talk around they just don't have international players. You don't have forwards, especially. You've got the quality in the background, in the back line. Lost a couple of their stars this year to rugby league. And then they pull the proverbial rabbit out of the hat. And you got to commend them. So just the same as I did to the Kiwis or the All Blacks yesterday, what a magnificent performance, right? Absolutely fantastic performance. And like I said, the first 20 minutes was all England getting across the advantage line. They looked fantastic on attack, getting across the gain line. And, but come halftime, they actually find themselves behind. So the first half was a battle, basically a game of 2 halves, right? And then after halftime, Australia sort of extend their lead. England come back until we get to those last 5 minutes. Australia going into the last 5 minutes, being down 28-30. They come back, score a converted try in the 75th minute, Andrew Kellaway, and they go to 35-30. Well, last minute, England hit back nicely through Itoje, and there they are, 37-35. Couple of minutes, should be able to close the game. The crowd's all happy. Sort of maybe against the I wouldn't say against the run of play, but Australia looked really good. Their backs looked phenomenal, and we'll get to that in a point. At that point in a minute, and then basically buzzer beater, phenomenal try down the left-hand side, and scored by Jorgensen after a lovely offload out the back, and took them to 40 points to 37, and then a wonderful touchdown conversion from Donaldson. So where does that leave us? If you're English fan, bitterly disappointed. For the rest of the world, maybe thinking, wow, what a fantastic result, incredible Wallabies. But what are the questions? Where actually is England and where the heck is Australia? So, was this a one off performance? It must be lovely coming on tour and being a completely underdog, written off. Everybody's ignoring you, talking about Argentina, South Africa, New Zealand, France, Ireland, England, and you can come under the radar, right? But we always know Australia, a very dangerous country that you play against in any sport. The last time they won at Twickenham was 2015. Since then, they played 12 games. They'd only won two of those games, one in Perth and one in that game at Twickenham in 2015. The other 10 wins came from England. So a pretty successful run rate against Australia. And again, no evidence that this team's going to show up. England, had a fantastic tour down in New Zealand earlier this year, and they sort of kicked on, and kicked up another level since the World Cup. And you could definitely see the impact that Felix Jones was having on the team. They looked really good, and like again, so many people have said they probably could have won that Test series in New Zealand, maybe 2-0, and people wouldn't have been surprised. That's how competitive and good they were. And then last week they sort of lost in the last bit of the game. As we know, the All Blacks came back and stole it from them. Instead of stole it, I'd say won it from them. And they looked a little bit rusty first game, and then this game too is their defense just wasn't quite there. A lot of confusion in that defense. They don't have that same defensive line that they had when they toured the All Blacks. And also, I would say, apart from that first 20 minutes, they weren't as aggressive and sharp and accurate on their attack. And so they weren't getting across the gain line, whereas the reverse was the case for the Australian team. Most people would have thought, hey, England got some big boys in that pack. They've got a very experienced team, too. They've got some really skilled youngsters in that team, which are exciting. But you would have thought that the physicality of that English pack would have been too much. But in fact, the Australian pack is the pack that stood up in the same way as the All Blacks stood up against the Irish yesterday. And you have to actually commend that Aussie pack, because they held up in the set pieces, they held up in the breakdown, they held up when they were carrying the ball into the get across the gain line. They were more successful than England, and they stood up physically. And that just allowed their outside backs to have to have front ball on the go. And those backs, people talk about the skill of the All Blacks back line. They speak about the skill of the French back line, and the Argentinians too have some wonderful players. And I actually think that Australian back line is maybe one of the top 2 or 3 in terms of individual skill in world rugby. They don't have that fly half yet. There's nothing wrong with Lalicia. Is it Lalicia? Noah. Actually, I don't always pronounce his name correctly, so forgive me if I haven't. And so, but in terms of their centers, in terms of their wings, Peach, Kellaway being around for a long time, not something special, whatever, but Tom Wright, what a player. Always been a huge fan of that guy at the Brumbies, but what an absolute player. And the interesting thing for me in the defensive lines, Ellis Genge was caught twice last week, one on the outside by Talia, and then the inside with Bowden Barrett and Will Jordan to score that try. And again, the way that England had their defensive line when Australia attacked from their 22 is there was Cunningham South, there was Ellis Genge, there's Ben Earl, and another forward. And he saw that space, created the dog leg in the defense, and he was gone all the way up, put that chip through, ended up in a try further up the field. And it's those little things which is saying to me, England, obviously, I mean, they've only had a couple of games since Felix Jones has left, but that was a big, big loss because he was a big, big addition to that team from a coaching perspective. And so from a defensive perspective, they've obviously got got to get used to those new structures and systems. And then you've also got to think, okay, the defensive guy, who is he, right? Is he going to be able to make an impact? We saw that with South Africa struggled a bit after Jacques Naba had left, right? So it takes time to get into that pattern. So they exploited that, and they exploited that beautifully. And then you've got to speak about Sahili. What an absolute star that has come across, right, from league. Now, he's not, this was his debut as an international, never played again against any opposition as a Wallaby, chosen for the Wallabies, hasn't been with any Super Rugby team, but he's not completely new, right? He was a schoolboy sensation. And I actually, before, I think it was yesterday or Friday, I actually looked at some YouTube videos of the kid. Man, and what that guy was incredible as a schoolboy, right? At the 6'5", lanky, could step, just cruised. His running style was just incredible. And I don't know what he did in league, although I never associated the two together, but I had seen a clip of him on either TikTok or Instagram of him, some of his hits and tackles and some of the stuff from rugby league and the state of origin where he nearly took the dude's head off. But so I thought, okay, he's not going to be able to make that transition very easily in terms of his tackling to union. But to be able to do that against the English team, English team is a good team, and at Twickenham as a debut, and have your skills and understanding of that game at such a high level, and then winning man of the match is absolutely incredible. So anyway, let's look at some of the stats, right? So the in terms of the stats is Australia actually had more possession, England had more territory. But then if we start looking at some of the details around this victory, and by the way, is I've got family in town, so I'm not designing all the fancy stat sheets that I normally do. So I'll be looking down a little bit. So I just want to say, please excuse me for doing that. But I got to spend some time with my family too. So in any case, 5 tries apiece. Missed penalty, missed conversion by England, 3 penalties to 2 versus Australia. So those are the little differences. But in terms of maybe missed points, so in terms of meters, 536 versus 456. So both teams came up to play, and both teams came to spread the ball, right? So this is fantastic, and I don't agree with people out there that are saying, "Oh, England are so crappy." And I see some of the individual player ratings that the scribes have given them 4 out of 10. It's not the case. There's sometimes you're just going to be beaten by a better team, right? Sometimes you're just going to be beaten by a better team. Australia were attacking space, stepping into space. They were very, very flat on the attack line when they had the ball, which is very unusual when you are coming up against a blitz defense. And I don't think England's blitz defense was as effective as it was in New Zealand. You can see there's a change in coach. It's not as effective as under Felix Jones. So straight away. And normally you stay a little bit deeper with a blitz defense, right? So you can get around the corners or kicking to the side. And we see a lot of cross kicking, etc. All Blacks are doing a lot of that. Ireland were doing a lot of that. But Australia were very, very flat, and lots of little pop passes over the top, creating dog legs, creating any space that they could, and also stepping into space just to create that little bit of space, open up a little bit of a gap, create a little bit of a dog leg that they could attack. And man, they were effective at that. So, clean breaks, 13 versus Australia, 6 for England. Defenders beaten 36 versus 24. Passes 182 versus 146. Offloads 11 versus 8. So not a huge difference between the two teams, right? Even though Australia had all the possession, or 52% of the possession, 53% of the possession, offloads 11 to 8. It's not a big difference, right? Clean breaks 13 to 6. Yeah, that's a big difference. Turnovers 1 is really where it happened, and that comes to the physicality of the pack, outshining England for that last 60 minutes, in my opinion, and being really good at the breakdown. But also some of those turnovers came from England's errors, right? You have to give it credit for that. And so it was very, very, it wasn't one side dominating the other in the lineouts or the scrums or breakdown where you say, oh my gosh, they were so poor. But lots of mistakes around the ruck and breakdown from England that allowed those turnovers. Kicks from hand, 25 versus 27 for England. Again, pretty even. Rucks won, etc. Pretty much the same. Tackle success, 82% versus 83, very even. Goal kicks, 2 goal kicks missed by England, 1 by Australia, not a huge difference. Ruck success rate, 97% for both teams. Lineouts, England 100%, Australia 75%. They lost 2 lineouts. Scrum success, I don't really understand those numbers. I mean, they're pretty off, right? It's 57 versus 67. I didn't see that. But then penalties conceded, 8 penalties by Australia, 6 by England. So it's not like, oh, we got penalized off the park. It's just these little differences and capitalizing on those differences. And I'll tell you where you start seeing the differences. Again, this is very similar to the All Blacks game versus Ireland, is you start seeing the cumulative effect of the individuals, and those together, that cumulative effect ends up with the result. So if you look at England, right, in terms of the guys who made the most meters and defenders beaten and tackles, etc. By the way, I told you 22 tackles. I think last week Ollie Lawrence was at 22. Ben Earl, 20 tackles. George Martin, 16. Cunningham South, 18 tackles, but 2 tries. That guy's working his socks off. And Cunningham South, 37 meters gained, right? And then you got Marcus Smith, 97 meters gained, 8 defenders beaten. Superstar. Sensation. That guy should have been at least a long time. I won't get into the Farrell Marcus Smith debate, but that guy should have been given a lot more chances. And then Tommy Freeman, 54 meters. Ollie Lawrence, 40 meters, 5 defenders beaten. People saying, he's not a test match center. People change their opinion from one week to the next. This guy's beaten 5 defenders, made 10 tackles, 22 last week, 10 carries. He's a ball carrier. He's a bloody brick, man. He's a tank. And then, Slatome, coming on later, 34 meters, doing some damage. But in terms of defenders beaten, you've pretty much got Ollie Lawrence on 5 and Marcus Smith at 8. But no standout numbers of obviously apart from Marcus Smith. But when you get to the Australian team, and now we start understanding how they attack space. So both the shape and structure of both teams in terms of their attack was great. Lots of pods, 3-1, 3-1-2. Sorry, not 3-1-2, 3-2-1-1, or 3-1-1-2, or 3-3-1-1. So they changed it up the whole time. But if you see what's happening here, Angus Bell, well, modern day prop extraordinaire, right? 21 meters, but 9 defenders beaten, right? 12 tackles, 10 carries. So he had 10 carries and he's beaten a defender almost every single carry, right? And then you start seeing guys like Valentini, Fraser McWright, 38 meters and 36 meters, 3 defenders beaten, 3 defenders beaten. So all the stuff starts accumulating. Peach, 64 meters. Ikatau, 36 meters, but 4 defenders beaten, 9 carries. Saili, 4 offloads, didn't make a lot of meters and didn't beat any defenders. But then Tom Wright, Andrew Kellaway, 86 meters, 71 meters, Jorgensen, 40 meters. A lot of that was a try at the end. But 2 defenders beaten, 6 defenders beaten, 4 defenders beaten. And this is where it all starts adding up, is those defenders beaten, right? They're actually beating them. So it's not really, this missed tackle, sloppy defending. It is great attacking play. And that's what I mean. It's like sometimes you just have to applaud these guys. And so it's Joe Schmidt, of course, but it's also the players. The players have been written off. They've had a tough couple of seasons, right? Nightmare under Eddie Jones at the World Cup. Sort of pretty cool at home this year, but then pretty much getting destroyed in the Rugby Championship, right? And I don't think it's unfair to say that. For them to come on the hardest tour and being written off, and for those players to stand up to, we know England's a very physical team, to stand up to those big bodies, to stand up to that physical team that's more settled with them than them, is playing at home and standing up physically, but the attack being on song, but attacking the space. So not only did they have the structures, so we see two different styles of play here. So if you look at maybe a team like Ireland, right, very very accurate, incredible in terms of their creativity, creating the overlap with extra men coming around the back, lots and lots of phases, lots and lots of passes. Whereas Australia were really flat. They were not doing the big loop arounds. They're not doing phases after phase after phase after phase. Getting across that gain line, but getting across that gain line by being able to attack space effectively and speed of pass to create their own dog legs. Whereas Ireland and that are creating their dog legs, or they're creating that space by just relentless, quick recycling, hitting that defender until you run out of defenders. You can't go anymore. And Ireland's so accurate, right? Really, really creative in terms of their back line and creating that own space. And we saw that against South Africa twice, where they, props are doing inside balls. There's two runners there and two runners on the outside, and just splitting us open in two test matches in a row. Australia doing a different form of attack. And so for that, you really have to admire the coaching team, the coaching team for being able to identify that and picking up as that as a potential weakness in England, and those players being able to execute. But again, just the same way as the All Blacks were able to nullify the Irish physicality, is you have to give the props to the forwards for being able to take England on physically and win that battle, in my opinion, and especially at the gain line. So every time, not only were they attacking a space, but they were getting across the gain line. They were accelerating into those tackles and breaking through. So we end up where we are, a magnificent victory for Australia. Congratulations to all your Aussie fans. And I'm sure you guys enjoyed it too, as neutrals. Obviously, if you're the team it's England, it's not fun. But I don't think it's like, oh, England's so crap, write them off, change a coach, whatever. There will be pressure on Borthwick. I don't think personally, long term, he's the guy. Just my opinion. Um, just given where the other teams are in terms of their coaching staff, and but anyway, that's a completely different discussion. So the next games for Australia, you can think, hey, maybe they're not just going to go to Ireland and Wales and Scotland and get destroyed. Maybe they can win a couple more games, and so that's going to be really exciting. And then, unfortunately, and that's why I said I wanted the All Blacks to lose to England, and so maybe if they can have an easier game against, or England has an easier game against Australia, so they come into the Springbok game overconfident. Then they go lose bloody both of them, and so now we have to play England next week, and they're gonna be fired up, right? Yeah. Well, damn it, man, bloody Aussies, what did you do? So anyway, my predictions have been way off this weekend, the last 2 weeks with these top teams. So anyway, I'd love to know, what did you guys think? What really caught your eye? And if you enjoyed this video, please, feel free to subscribe, leave your comments, and leave your thoughts. And I really appreciate you spending the time watching this video. I hope you have a beautiful weekend. And we got some Sunday game tomorrow, South Africa versus Scotland. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens there. So maybe the Southern Hemisphere can continue their winning ways. I don't know. I think it's going to be a really tough game. But whatever, have a beautiful day. Enjoy the rugger, and see you again. Take it easy. Cheers. So 22 tackles for Ollie Lawrence. And then young Feo Wabasso is 7 defenders beaten and 76 meters run. Incredible game. And second only to Smith at 78 meters in terms of the English team. But the most interesting stat was the player of the match, man of the match, whatever you want to call him, performer of the match, however they call him nowadays, Wallace Satiti, 79 meters. He made more meters than anybody else. And of course, the thing for him was those offloads, right? The offloads, they've got the try, open up the defenses, especially the first one that open up Talea's try in the first 15 minutes, right? So Mark Talea, again, great game, 37 meters, 2 defenders beaten, 9 carries. And out of those 9 carries, he scores 2 tries. That's quite a good damn record. New Zealand obviously scored 3 tries versus England's 1 try. And then in terms of some of the other stats, meters made by New Zealand, 492 meters versus 371 for England. And so that's the big difference too, right? So in the rugby championship, New Zealand wasn't dominating in the meters carried. In fact, they got dominated by South Africa again, which is unusual. So this is where England has to evolve, right? It's number one, the fundamentals in terms of that possession, getting that possession, because you have the forwards, you have the big, strong boys in there. To get those forwards, play that basic game, but also change your attacking so that you can actually have more attack meters, right? So that's the big difference there. And then New Zealand, 24 defenders beaten versus 15. New Zealand, 208 passes versus 100. Now I'm going to put my neck out, and I don't have the exact stats by half, but New Zealand weren't playing that passing game in that first half, right? They were struggling. So that started happening in the second half, and that's when they started getting runners like Tuipolotti and that coming through, right? So the second half was the big thing for New Zealand to be able to come from that 8 points down. But the other thing about New Zealand, 14 offloads versus 4 for England. Again, just a difference in that game. So when they're making those breaks, they're getting in that offload. And I was watching a All Blacks documentary, like, whatever. Hey, here's us training in Japan this week, kind of thing. And I saw Razor speaking to the team actually before the guys came to England, and he was saying, right, they were talking about offloads. We're going to earn the offload. This is how we're going to do the offloads, and that came through that game big time, of how they'd been thinking about that, how it's a key component of that game to keep themselves unstructured and to keep the momentum between the backs and the forwards just carry on going. And that's what New Zealand's always been known for, right? So they're trying to get back to that off the back of their fundamentals and the strong forward pack, which definitely with, like I said, with Tui Pelota is definitely helping. And again, I spoke about the kicks, but 30 kicks by New Zealand and 33 by England. So an absolute cracker of a game. England had their opportunity, so it might seem like my stats are a little bit critical of England. Actually, they're not. They had the chance to win it, I think, but it's not something, hey, England, you blew that. It's New Zealand did really well to fight back, and a lot of that came from their forward pack, a lot of that came from their scrum, a lot of that came from their replacements, where actually I thought the English replacements in the forward pack would hold the edge from what I'd seen from that All Black pack this year. So All Blacks have worked on that weakness and fixed it. Tui Pelota, like I said, I've mentioned his name like 4 times now, makes a big difference coming on. That physicality where they never had that. Wallace Satiti's been a revelation for them, right? Came in due to injuries, and man, he's taken his chances, because Dalton Papali'i, great player, but just not the same. Luke Jacobson, that they use a lot, one of their favorites, and I'm not a fan in terms of his impact on a game. And Todd Blackadder, absolute workhorse beast. So, but then they got, and this is very similar between New Zealand and England. They had Curry and campaign, both the Currys and Kane, just getting your head stuck in, you putting the dirty work, you're going to do the turnovers, and they could burn it all. And Cunningham South, ball carrying, wreaking havoc, same as Surveyor and Satiti. So Yeah, it's not a criticism of both teams, just an observation. I think New Zealand needs to work on their attacking structure, and when they do, they're going to be back to their absolute best because they're getting those fundamentals right. England are doing so much good stuff, but they're going to have to work on some of their fundamentals. But having said that, right, is that this is their first game back after a break when New Zealand's been at it, for what, 7 games since that English series, 6 or 7 games since that English series. So they've had time to develop where England hasn't since that series. So England are going to only get better and better, and that's why I wanted them to bloody win. So it's easier for the game against South Africa in a couple of weeks, right? So England next week against Australia, that's going to be awesome, and New Zealand versus Ireland, which is going to be phenomenal. And then the Box versus Scotland on the Sunday. So we've got Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then England in the Box 2 weeks' time, and then New Zealand and France. So fantastic few weekends ahead, and fantastic game today. So props to both teams. And what about that haka? I hope New Zealand don't get fined for moving forward and coming too close and breaching that line. But I thought it was fantastic in the way that England moved forward, then New Zealand moved forward after Joe Marler's comments, the crowd singing Swing Low, Sweet Chariot while it's all going on. And the players got stuck into each other. So fantastic test match. Hope you guys enjoyed it, but I'd love to know what you thought of the teams, the players, the guys who made the biggest difference, and what you liked or what you didn't like. I also thought the ref had a phenomenal game and fair, and I like the way that it's all communicated to the stadium. Hey, I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, subscribe, leave your comments, leave your thoughts. Well done, New Zealand, and well done, England. That's just playing the All Blacks to snatch that victory from the jaws of defeat. So you've got to give them props for that. But England will be back. And got me a bit worried when they play the Box. But I think they'll have an easier time against Australia this coming weekend and could probably put a nice big score on them. So, guys, have a beautiful weekend. Hope you enjoy the rugby and see you again. Take it easy. Cheers.